Welcome to KRA's The Hub, the official podcast of KRA Corporation. And now get ready to hear workforce topics and trends you need to know on the go.
Hello and welcome back to KRA's The Hub. This is Doug Foresta. Of course, I'm here with Jonathan Overall, but also our special guest today is Jade Gingerich. She is the Director of Employment Policy at the Maryland Department of Disabilities. Jonathan, great to be with you. Jade, welcome.
Great. Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm very excited to share knowledge and information with you all, and looking forward to this.
Thank you, Doug. Jade, thank you as well for joining us. We're excited for today's conversation, really an important topic for us to be able to explore within workforce. So jumping in, can you provide us with an overview of the Maryland Department of Disabilities and the work in employment policy, and also your role involved with that?
Sure, absolutely. So Maryland Department of Disabilities, otherwise known as MDOD for short, is the nation's only cabinet-level cross-disability agency in the country. So we're pretty unique in the role that we play, although I'd like for us to be less unique. I'd like for every state to have a department such as ours. And we're charged with improving the coordination and the delivery of services across state agencies in order to ensure that we leave no Marylander behind by promoting equality of opportunity, access, and choice for Marylanders with disabilities. So where this is relevant in the employment space is, when you think about workforce development, there are lots of different federal funding streams that come down to the state level that are sort of scattered across different agencies. So you have veteran services, you have aging, you have vocational rehabilitation services, which in our state is known as the Division of Rehabilitation Services. You have labor that then administers, the workforce development resources, but with the local, control and partnership. And so there are a number of different players in that space. And so how are we ensuring that whatever the services are being provided, they're provided in a coordinated manner that are working effectively for the individuals wherever they enter the system to achieve the outcomes, and hopefully, reducing some of the redundancies in the system. People cut across and go to different services and so forth. And how can we ensure that as they're accessing services, what they're getting is building on their skills, abilities, employability, and not having them just do the same, assessment over and over again, 3 or 4 different places. How can we really work together and also present a coordinated front to business, right? Because business doesn't want to have to navigate to find qualified job seekers across a multiple of agencies. So that's some of the work that we do in the department to really help facilitate that coordination and collaboration and dialogue.
Thank you so much, Jade. So, listeners are probably familiar with some of the federal guidelines, ADA and things like that. But can you talk a little bit about, how does state level initiatives in Maryland intersect with federal guidelines and how you navigate that?
Sure. So, one of the things that we often have to spend a lot of time helping people to understand is that the bulk of funding for employment is federal. Right. And so there are sometimes individuals who want to come in and affect systems change and so forth, and they don't understand where we can innovate and create change and opportunity, and where the advocacy or changes need to occur at the federal level. And sometimes there's disconnects, right? And so I view our role at the state level as also trying to figure out if there are gaps or disconnects, how can we at least interpret or align where those federal lines are more closely, and then, use the onus that's on us as a state to figure out how to fill those gaps or to ensure that linkage or connection and so forth. I think it's really important to understand that, when we look at vocational rehabilitation in particular, I think sometimes there's a perception that, all people with disabilities go over there, they've got it covered. And it's 80% federally funded, at least in our state, almost 80% federally funded. However, the demand outstrips the funding and the capacity. And so we have a wait list for services, which means that It's not just a simple sort of handoff from like a local workforce agency back to doors. A person may have been there, they may have not found eligible because of the wait list, or they may have been placed on the wait list and yet still have a need for employment supports and services. So navigating all of that. So, and regardless of the funding source, which at the adult level is scattered across these different partner agencies and are driven by eligibility, also trying to figure out how we ensure that students are exiting school linked to something that's going to help them continue on the employment pathway, and ensuring that again, that coordination, collaboration, and unification is occurring in a really thoughtful way to help improve those outcomes. I think it's really important to note that some of the work that we've been doing in this space is messaging around ability, right, and expectations. So in Maryland, the vision is that everyone can work with the right supports and services. The question is, what are the right supports and services, and how are we defining work? Are we defining work as 40 hours a week, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday? That might not be the best fit for some individuals, but can they work 1 hour, 2 hours, 10 hours? So how do we help ensure the interpretation of the federal requirements and alignment, that coordination at the state level? And then how do we ensure that everybody is thinking about and is prepared to serve individuals who may or may not identify as having a disability? They may come hidden as barriers to employment, and how do we help create that sort of culture of expectation and opportunity, and really support individuals to have higher expectations, and for our service systems to be meeting and helping them navigate to get to those outcomes.
That's good. Thank you for that overview and background, Jade. Could you elaborate on some of the key programs that Maryland has initiated for disability employment?
Sure. So I think one of the most important ones that we've worked on for multiple years is something called Employment First. So making employment the first choice for individuals with disabilities. And we took a lot of time on sort of creating that space and vision, and had a lot of, but they can't work because, and really trying to build that out. And so helping to affect some of those changes, because when you start to approach things from everyone can work, then how do we make the systems align? Because that's a very different conversation. I think sometimes when we talk about disability employment, we get stuck in, but they can't do this, or they can't do that, or they can't do that, as opposed to what can they do? How can they do it? How do we make it align? And so creating that vision and expectation across all of our partners was really, really important. And also working with families, right? And schools and all of those different pieces. We also have done some work in terms of creation of a Maryland Youth Leadership Forum. So identifying individuals with disabilities in high school to really help develop their skills and abilities and so forth, to really help them in that advocacy. We've headed up a national research project. Maryland was one of 6 states, called Promoting the Readiness of Minors on Supplemental Security Income, or PROMISE. And that was really critical work. We recruited over 2,000 youth on SSI, and almost 1,000 of them got intensive supports and services to help improve their families' expectations around work and the individual's access and support to achieving employment. Because some of the messaging at the federal level, right, is you have to say you can't work to access some of these benefits. Now, but then there's programs and services and supports also funded by the feds that give you the counseling or the work incentives knowledge that you can work, but here's how you navigate it. And so again, I think some of that comes back to that sort of state and federal. How are we sort of aligning that messaging? How are we sort of saying, that folks on SSI can work and they don't have to fear losing their benefits, and here are the resources and the information, and how can we infuse that across the system? We also created what's called a Medicaid Buy-In, our Employed Individuals with Disabilities program, which was really critical because it allowed individuals to go to work or to increase their earnings and not face the risk of losing their Medicaid, which in some instances was providing the very funding for the supports that gave them the ability to be able to return to work. For example, like medications that help manage some of their symptoms and so forth. And so that Medicaid Buy-In was a really significant policy or systems change that helped remove one of the very big barriers to employment. We also have done a lot of work in that enhanced partnership and engagement, particularly with labor. And then we were also the second state in the country to eliminate the payment of subminimum wages. So, subminimum wages, again, is a federal construct that says that individuals can be paid less than subminimum wage. Maryland no longer recognizes the federal subminimum wage certificates, so individuals must be paid at minimum wage or higher. Again, I believe that everybody has some skill or ability that could be paid, at least 1 hour a week at or above minimum wage. And I know I personally have seen experiences of individuals who were actually working at jobs getting paid minimum wage or above, but yet we're also getting paid 10 cents an hour. And so eliminating that, I think, was a really, really critical piece and a systems change. And then we also collaborate with businesses, such as we're working with Northrop Grumman on an autism or neurodiversity internship program, and helping to bring that innovation, that coordination, collaboration in ways that really help empower and provide the knowledge and technical assistance to be able to do things differently to all of our partners.
Thank you for that. And I love what you said, that it's not all or nothing, right? It doesn't mean, well, if somebody can't do full-time employment, well, then that's it. They just can't work. And I love what you said about, even if everyone can do something, even if it's 1 hour, and also the misconception that if I'm on certain benefits that I can't work. And it's not true, obviously, that you can't work on SSI. And I think that's a misconception a lot of people have. Well, as we record this, we're in almost mid-September, and we're going to be heading into National Disability Awareness Month. I'm curious about, what does National Disability Awareness Month mean to your agency, and also if you plan to do anything specifically for National Disability Awareness Month.
So, I think that October is always a great time to remind people about the importance of National Disability Employment Awareness Month. Although I think that the education and awareness shouldn't be limited to just 1 month of the year, right? I mean, I think that for anyone who works in the hiring space, the workforce space, every day should be Disability Employment Day.
Right.
So I challenge you all to learn one new thing about disability employment every day, not just during October. And it should be something that's recognized year round and actually become something that's operationalized in the hiring practices and the decisions that are being made across all aspects of service provision and also business. In terms of events, October is always a busy month because we're asked to go and present across to businesses and so forth. So we have a number of local events that we're going to be attending. We do have a disability awards program that's being coordinated, planned, set up for October. And we're also working on pulling together a webinar to highlight one of the innovative models that we have here in Maryland. It's an autism hiring program that really targets individuals who have work experience or have some education, but whom have struggled with sort of that accessing and retention of employment or have been underemployed. We're really excited about this because it's a population that, as a result of those funding limitations, aren't able to access other supports and services. And so we're going to be talking about that, hearing from some of the employers who have hired, and it's being replicated across the state. And so that we're looking forward to really hosting a webinar so folks can hear about that model and its success and so forth.
That's great. Thank you for that, Jade. It's great to hear some of the initiatives that are happening around National Disability Employment Awareness Month. Now, as we look forward to the future, and really with your glasses, your lens that is looking forward in time, what are some of the trends in disability employment that we should be watching in the coming years?
So I think that work incentive counseling that I've mentioned, so helping folks to understand that and connect them up with certified work incentives counselors to be able to get the information that help them to make informed choices. Because let's be honest, being on SSI means you're going to be stuck in poverty. And so, by being able to increase your earnings without jeopardizing your benefits, I think we give people a better chance to be able to move ahead. So that's certainly one of the areas where I hope that we can do more. Workspace learning, particularly for students. There's research out there that indicates that students with disabilities who have paid work experiences while in school are far more likely to be employed after they exit school. And I wouldn't be surprised, that was research that was done in the disability space, but I wouldn't be surprised if that applies across all populations. But I think that true work-based experience is really, really critical, and we're going to be seeing more of that. Individualized, integrated employment. So there's something called customized employment, where individuals, job developers, and there's a certification program for that, but they go in and they identify what businesses' needs are at a functional level, right? Not give me your job openings, but let's walk around and see, what things seem to be getting stuck here. Would it be helpful if someone came in and could, do this function for you that would help sort of, reduce that backup? And you look at what the business's needs are, and then they work with individuals with disabilities and identify those individuals whose strengths align with that business need and create what's called a customized job. It meets both the business's needs and the individual's needs. And while it's specific to individuals with disabilities, I think that there's some broad applicability for all individuals that are experiencing barriers to employment. Looking at the functional needs, like, not as part of a whole, but more individualized, and the individual strengths, and creating that alignment, I think is really going to help us to access and create more opportunities. So I think that those are some of the things that are going to be important. And that ability to access services and supports and universal design, regardless of where you enter the door. I think that we need to be figuring out how we can meet people where they are, serve them, and not just be constantly handing them off or referring them on someplace else, ensuring those warm handoffs or that linkage, and that that if you're handing them off to someplace else, that what they're going to get, and that they're going to get something, and that they're not going to get lost between here and there, are, I think, some of the things that I see coming down the line, both specific in the disability world, but I think more broadly.
A couple things. So first of all, how can I want to make sure people are able to stay updated about, the work that the Maryland Department of Disabilities is doing. So let's give people that information, if you don't mind.
Sure. So we have a website. It's mdod.maryland.gov. And then we also are on Facebook, the Maryland Department of Disabilities, and the platform formerly known as Twitter. I think it's X now. So those are all places. Folks are always welcome to reach out to me, jade.gingerich at maryland.gov. But those are some ways that folks can keep an eye on some of the different things that we're doing.
That's great. And, I just want to open up to, any closing remarks for listeners about disability employment.
Sure. So, Maryland faces a 1.7% unemployment rate, and Nevada has the highest, which is 5.3%, right? And while there's significant job growth and opportunity, we're also looking at a significant drop in students exiting school with the class of 2025, coupled with the exodus of baby boomers from the workplace. So I think that the workforce development community as a whole and employers need to become more skilled and adept at working with and hiring what have historically been considered underutilized workforce populations, such as individuals with disabilities, if our economy is going to be able to continue to grow and produce. So I think that it's something that's not just sort of, it's a good thing to do because it's a good thing to do, but there's really compelling data that says, wow, we really have to approach workforce development and what we do very differently looking forward.
Yeah, I just want to add, before we go over to you, Jonathan, every one of us, I think, in our lived experience has experienced in the last couple of years waiting a little bit longer online, or maybe you go to a restaurant, it's closed on a Tuesday, right? Or, whatever it is, we've all had this lived experience of, just everything takes a little bit longer, things are closed a little bit earlier. And, what I hear you saying, we really need all hands on deck. As you said, the business case is very clear. And the social implications of not bringing everyone into the workplace. We all experience that firsthand.
Right, exactly.
Well, again, thank you, Jade, for your time today. You shared so many great insights and really gave us a background of the work that you're doing in the state of Maryland, but also, I think, a visual of how the funding streams operate, the programs operate, and every day is National Disability Awareness Month, and we can do more in our local community. So again, on behalf of our audience today, thank you for sharing the insights and also highlighting such a very important issue today. And we appreciate you for joining us today on KRA's The Hub podcast.
Thank you for listening to KRA's The Hub. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. To learn more about KRA Corporation, visit www.kra.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll be back soon with a new episode.